Space, the final frontier. There's so much out there to explore and discover. Yet, here on Earth, we keep making so many video games. Imagine if people gave astronauts more time to prepare for their upcoming flights, except it's exactly that, but with game developers. That's exactly what happened for games released between 2021 and 2022, as the world was set ablaze beforehand. Now, I could go and name every video game that has come out, but instead, I figured I'd just give people my opinion on them. Keep in mind that these are games that I played within the past year. This includes games that released before 2021. So, there will be 3 things that appear on screen. Number 1, my overall rating for each game. Number 2, how many hours I've played them. And number 3, their retail price, if there is one. Unless, of course, I can't find how many hours I played, but then I just won't put it up on screen while I'm talking. So let's start with a game that is over 15 years old. Bounty Hunter, Republic Commando, Knights of the Old Republic, Rogue Squadron 2 and 3, Racer, and The Force Unleashed all came out in the 2000s. However, one series that companies bring back countless times is Battlefront. 2005's Star Wars Battlefront 2 in particular might be the best one of the entire franchise and one of the best Star Wars games ever made. Now, the game has 3 main modes: Instant Action, Galactic Conquest, and Campaign. Instant Action lets you build your own set of battles, and includes dozens of different planets and 2 different Star Wars eras to choose from. Galactic Conquest, however, takes that one step further by making players go into either Star Wars era in search of, well, Galactic Conquest. Campaign then puts you into the shoes of a clone trooper who has to complete tasks in certain battles on different planets. All 3 modes greatly enhance the replayability of the game, which is exactly why it stood the test of time for almost 20 years. The best part is that it's quarter the price of EA's Battlefront 2, and it provides a better single-player experience. After all, it doesn't have microtransactions. It also has the perk of being on the PSP at one point, which means that you can play it on the go. A lot of the other Star Wars games for the 2000s are around the same price as Battlefront 2, which means that they can offer a better single-player experience than EA. Okay, so maybe there's 2 exceptions, but the statement still stands! Amazingly, Terraria had a 6-month head start on Minecraft, but it couldn't keep up with it. The 2 games are almost the same in terms of gameplay. However, Terraria has a better feeling of combat. It has a much larger variety of weapons to choose from, like swords, magic, or even guns. Some of them are the most insane weapons I've ever seen in a video game, and I love them. There's a total of 8 bosses, with the Underworld's boss, the Wall of Flesh, putting any world onto hard mode. Hard mode also gives players more difficult bosses to fight with. For example, Skeletron Prime gives players a mechanical variation of Skeletron in normal mode. What's the difference between the 2? Well, Skeletron is insane, and Skeletron Prime is a death sentence. I'm gonna say this right off the bat. I initially did not have a positive experience with City Skylines. I played it for almost 4 hours straight before stopping because I was ashamed of myself. However, that does tell me that I enjoy playing the game. Now, I'm no stranger to management games. I played a good amount of Motorsport Manager on PC and mobile. Unlike those games, however, City Skylines has you run a city. It fills the void of SimCity, which has been dormant on PC since 2013. Because the City Skylines released in 2015, it now has several features that weren't in SimCity. On top of that, City Skylines is a more realistic take on a city environment than SimCity. Another thing that City Skylines has, for better or for worse, are DLCs. There are almost a dozen different DLCs, with each one adding on to the base game. However, they all cost around $15 each, which is pretty expensive. It's unfortunate because each DLC gives the game a fresh coat of paint. Anyways, City Skylines offers a worthwhile experience to people who enjoy the commerce side of gaming. The only issue is that players need a timer while playing it. Stardew Valley is a unique game, much like other indie titles. However, Stardew is one of the most popular, and for good reason. I hardly ever felt stressed or anxious while playing the game, even when you go into the lower depths of the mines. Stardew pushes itself to be more than just a farming experience. I mean, it isn't Farming Simulator. Stardew Valley also lets people collect, fish, mine, socialize, buy, and sell items. Of course, the game's energy bar limits players so that they choose each of their tasks wisely. Players often end up doing something different each day because of this. You have to collect items for buildings like the community center and the library. There's also the blacksmith shop, where players can use metal bars to upgrade their tools, except for weapons. Places like the mine or the adventurers guild are where you can get those newer upgraded weapons. Apart from that, there's a total of 28 NPCs. All of which you can go and socialize and have own events and get married to and divorce them. It's a lot. Each of them can be gifted collectibles that they will either love or hate. Most of them also show up at festivals throughout each season. You see, the problem with Stardew Valley is that there's a lot of elements that I can talk about. However, people can only experience all those beautiful elements by playing the game. Stardew Valley just has way too much going for it, but that's why I would strongly recommend everyone to buy it. Trust me, you will have a good time once you get around the farming mechanics. But what's wrong with a little bit of a learning curve to actual in-game profit? This recent game does one thing better than most of its counterparts. It has a well-built crash damage model. It also plays into a point system for every time you hit, spin, or wreck an opponent's vehicle. Unlike most racing games, Wreckfest implores you to drive dirty, making it a lot more eventful and stress-free. I've played a fair share of racing games, and they can get on your nerves pretty easily. However, Wreckfest does enough to make people go, damn, instead of, oh, come on! Not to mention that some of the tracks have taken some creative liberties with their layouts. Oh, I forgot to mention that Wreckfest has a single-player campaign that players can put aside after 20 to 30 minutes of gameplay. If players don't want to use the steering wheel in Wreckfest, they can use their controllers too. The game also has a solid modding community on PC. It's also continuously updated, with online single-player tournaments giving players points that they can use on unique cars that aren't found anywhere else in the game. For example, there's a tractor trailer that literally looks like it came out of a Mad Max movie. Trust me, people will make that comparison to a lot of vehicles in the game. It may get repetitive after a while, but usually the game comes back and slaps the player in the face, reminding them that it's actually a really fun experience. After all, I've ended up pouring in 50 hours into this game. Let's jump back in time a little. It's 2015. A guy named Toby Fox just released Undertale. The last thing he expected was for it to blow up. So now in 2022, he's one of the biggest indie developers, but not many people will talk about Deltarune as much as they do with Undertale. The strange part about that is that Deltarune's the better game. Sure, it still has the same level of charm and complexity as Undertale, but it's more refined. That's especially the case with the new turn-based battle mechanics. They make Deltarune feel more like a typical strategy RPG from the 1990s. The story is also much less linear. It often comes down to Toby creating much better dialogue than Undertale has. It causes Deltarune to be a much better playing experience. experience. Despite this, Undertale still edges out Deltarune for having much more interesting characters. After all, it has Sans, Papyrus, and Flowey, who all have very interesting conversations with you. On top of that, you also have Toby Fox's ability to compose music. Ever since Undertale, he hasn't stopped making soundtracks that fuel people with energy and excitement. That even includes Leon's Battle Tower theme in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Fans can often give people a list of Toby's songs and not have a favorite because they're all amazing. That's also what Deltarune does better than Undertale. Undertale has iconic themes, and Deltarune has a beautiful soundtrack, despite them sharing similar musical themes. Plus, one of them has 2 free chapters to play through. It's important because they shouldn't be. People should be paying for Deltarune. However, Toby Fox was willing to give them for free. I respect him for that, but please make people buy Chapter 3 and onwards. Pokemon Sword and Shield are in a weird spot right now. If people say they're good or bad, they could be right. There are a lot of things that the Gen 8 games do well though. We had areas that were more open world than the rest of the map. The EXP share feels more refined and built into the gameplay. Gigantamaxing and Dynamaxing are unique alternatives to Mega Evolutions and Z moves. All the gym leaders are at least a little likable. We finally have a reason to have a rival. I also feel like we have a good amount of new Pokemon. However, those things explain why the Gen 8 games aren't that good. The wild areas are the only places that are open world and have 2-dimensional trees. I still hate the EXP share because it keeps making the game too easy. I used almost a dozen Pokemon to make the battles at least a little more challenging. However, the game was still pretty easy. I can never remember what Pokemon can Dynamax or Gigantamax. They're good features, but I always seem to get them mixed up. Besides, the only difference is that Gigantamax Pokemon can just change their appearance. That would make them better than Dynamax Pokemon, but they're also harder to find. Plus, I think Mega Evolution was just a better idea. It looked a lot cooler. It worked outside of gym battles. The gym leaders in Sword and Shield are also likable, but forgettable, because I can't remember any of their names. Hop has a good reason to be our rival, with him being Leon's younger brother. However, he's not very likable, and he's not a strong trainer. Finally, there's not enough Pokemon in the game, which is a problem. 1, Pokemon is the name of the franchise, and 2, there's not enough of them to include a national dex for the game. Regardless, Pokemon Sword and Shield are good Pokemon games. They're much better than X and Y, which I regard as the worst ever Pokemon games I've ever played. However, they're not as good as Platinum or Black and White, as Platinum is loved by fans, and Black and White is loved by me. I don't think many fans can say that Sword and Shield offers a better experience than any other Pokemon game. The story and gameplay were not as good as they could have been. It is a step up from X and Y and Sun and Moon though. It was also another step towards having an open world Pokemon game, which we got first in January 2022, and also in November of 2022. So even though the Pokemon company is iffy sometimes, they still make good games. Apart from that, everyone hates it. The open world racing genre in the modern era has been around since the mid to late 2000s. The first notably successful game was Need for Speed Most Wanted in 2005. It's one of the best in the entire franchise. However, before EA's next open world installment in November 2008, they decided to help publish a game in January that same year. Now, have I played that version? No. However, I don't think there's much difference between itself and Burnout Paradise Remastered. Once players open the game, they realize that it has an outstanding soundtrack to go alongside its high-octane gameplay. One of Burnout Paradise's greatest qualities is its crash physics, which is still better than many racing games today. I'm talking to you, Forza, with your useless simulation damage. The Burnout games purposely emphasize the crashes because they're enjoyable to watch, even though you just caused them. It also works well in Paradise because the game directly emphasizes the importance of wrecking your opponents to win races. It's a game that I, a car enthusiast, can tell people to play. People don't need to know anything about cars. They can just drive around and wreck into the game's numerous buildings and vehicles. Despite this, the game can start to get dry after a while. It's just driving cars, wrecking them, and winning races to get more of them. Sure, there are different race events like Burning Route, Marked Man, and Stunt Run. However, that's about all the game has to offer apart from the island outside of Paradise City. It hurts that I only have 8 hours of playtime and it's giving me such an enjoyable experience. However, I like it more than Forza Horizon 5. So it should start taking notes from a 14-year-old video game. I have a very complicated relationship with Genshin Impact. On one hand, we have well-made open-world and combat mechanics, and on the other, we have the gacha system and almost too much content. What do I mean by that? Well, the current world player's Roman is massive. Mondstadt, Liyue, and Inazuma all have vast amounts of lore in this story that pulls you into their world. The game also makes people play with 4 different characters at once because of the existence of the Adventurers Guild. Players can switch between different characters to use their abilities, with only a few of them being worthless. That's not to mention that all of Genshin Impact's characters have well-crafted stories, like Ayaka or the Raiden Shogun. Genshin Impact also has a wide variety of characters that appears in events, festivals, challenges, or even making drinks. When MiHoYo, whose slogan is Tech Otaku Save the World, puts their cards right, the game can be very enjoyable. However, it's usually not. As I said before, the problem with Genshin Impact is the gacha system and the amount of content. First off, the gacha system can be very, very infuriating. People can end up spending up to 90 wishes on a 5-star character or a weapon that they don't want. It causes people to spend a lot of money on the game. Unlike me, as I've paid $0 like a true free-to-play gamer. Secondly, there's too much content, and I mean that in 2 ways. 1, there's a number of quests to get through. 2, there's an overabundance of weapons, artifacts, and ascension materials to make your character stronger. I spend so many hours collecting things for my characters that I haven't even maxed them all out yet. However, the process keeps repeating itself because they can't stop making new characters, especially female ones. I would only recommend Genshin Impact to people who are okay with grinding for each quest. After all, its storyline is still well told, despite there being too much of it. In addition, I've promised myself that I will only ever play the game again when there's a new story quest or Archon quest. I cannot let this game take any more of my life away. I got over my alleged addiction. It's time for Forza Horizon 5. It does a phenomenal job at making its world feel alive. The characters introduced to us benefit different aspects of the story. Each one makes the game more enjoyable to play through. For example, there's an expeditions where players have to drive a float into a fiesta and then drive it off a danger sign. The game gives us that feeling whenever we think of Mexico, a big diverse world filled with colors. Driving down the Grand Caldera is a blast, especially during a race. In addition, there are showcase events where players can race against a train, a cargo airplane, 2 jet skis, and even 2 bone shaker monster trucks. The fact that the game lets us do tricks in one of the monster trucks after we beat them is insane. I wish things like that happened more in the game, but I still overall had a good time with the main story. Forza Horizon 5's big problem is its overall online content. The problem with it is that it's the same one introduced in Forza Horizon 4, which came out almost 4 years ago. I can agree that the Horizon playlists in Forza Horizon 4 were very enjoyable to complete. It helped people keep playing the game after the main story. The problem is that Playground Games, the developers of the Forza Horizon series, just thought they could apply the same online content into Horizon 5. However, they replaced the percentages of the playlist with points. That made players realize that they don't have to play the game as much. As a player, that makes me want to play the game less. Unfortunately, it's more of a psychological issue. For example, I'm more inclined to play championships where I have to increase the percentage rather than increase my points. A game with less predictability causes me to play it more. Why else would I have over 200 hours in Horizon 4 but barely even hit 60 in Horizon 5? Sure, there are some vehicles that I'm in love with. The revamped Route Recreator is what we wanted it to be in Horizon 4. And the game looks gorgeous on Series X. But parts of the game were not improved on, which is a real shame. I loved the first 30 or 40 hours that I played. It was a 10 out of 10 experience where I couldn't wait to pick up the controller again as soon as I put it down. But after the curtains fall on the main story, it doesn't do much for me. It makes me feel bad for how much effort the developers put into Horizon 5 for it to just be only a better single-player experience. Hopefully, Playground Game improves the multiplayer experience so that it becomes the game we all know and love. My hopes have been answered! Okay, so I haven't technically played Danganronpa Decadence. However, I have played through the games that are included in it. The only exception is Danganronpa S Ultimate Summer Camp, because I haven't unlocked the original version in V3. Anyways, the Danganronpa games are very different from other visual novels. Players take part in trials with classmates to find out who done it. Because of this, the class goes from 16 students to just 6 after completing the games. However, don't be discouraged by the starting number. Each character has an ultimate talent that makes each of them unique from each other. It also makes each murder player's investigate personalized to the murderer and the victim. Usually the breakthrough is to one of the classmates, either through an item or a string of logic. However, this sometimes takes hours to figure out. By the way, the game is still a visual novel outside of its trial mechanics. There are free time events where players can talk or hang out with classmates, which is usually done by giving them an item they like. It helps players connect to each character separate from the group environment, which provides some very interesting conversations. However, some of the characters don't do much apart from setting up the rest of the game or fan service. There are a lot of characters though that make the games complete thrill rides from beginning to end. Each plot twist makes each game even better, unless you're chapter 3 in every single one of them. However, I'm looking forward to more twists and turns right up until I complete Danganronpa V3. My one issue with the games though, they could be a bit hit and miss. Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc is the first game in the series. It was a great start to the franchise, but Danganronpa 2 never pleased me as much as 1 did. Danganronpa 3, however, redeems itself with heavily fleshed out characters. After all, it does have a AAA budget. As I said earlier, be prepared for chapter 3 in each game. They're always the worst, and you just gotta live with it. Apart from that, I'm glad the games got a Switch release, because I recently realized that only 5 million people have bought the games. That number should deservedly be higher than it is. Mario Kart 8! Look, I'm not going to talk about the main game. It would make this take too long, so I'm just going to talk about the pass. First off, the idea of having 48 more courses is crazy. Motorsport enthusiasts like me want to have a variety of tracks to choose from, and the game does exactly that. We get 1 new course, 2 courses from Mario Kart Tour, and a few others from older games. However, that's all I can say about it positively speaking. Some of the issues with Wave 1 include simple tracks and textures, no anti-gravity, and a lack of space on the track. Nintendo never thought about how much space players would need in Mario Kart Tour. It requires a different skill set, much like Super Mario Run. I think what happened was that they made the tour courses first and then the other ones later. In doing so, the other courses feel smaller than their previous versions. For example, Coconut Mall on the Wii never felt as clunky as it does on the Switch. Shroom Ridge and that random GBA track are boring to drive. None of them have anti-gravity, which is the main feature of Mario Kart 8. The textures aren't the best either. I don't know how Nintendo allowed any of these errors to happen. They may have made the developers make the 8 tracks faster than they usually can. However, the positives are better than the negatives, so hopefully Nintendo makes my $25 investment worth it. Well, that's it. Those are all the games that I played in 2021 and the first half of 2022. Looking back at my ratings, I'm not surprised that they're all solid titles. The only game to score lower than an 8 out of 10 was Genshin Impact. Plus, always remember that this is all my opinion. If you're looking for more, don't worry. The titles released between 2021 and the first half of 2022 that I haven't played will appear in another video.